In the National Gallery of Art you can find this painting entitled Joshua commanding the sun to stand still upon Gibeon. It's a large and dramatic painting from 1816 by the British artist John Martin. It fits perfectly within his oeuvre, which contains works like Belshazzar's Feast, The Fall of Babylon, Cyrus the Great defeating the Chaldean, and Pandemonium. He painted the work on the miracle performed by Joshua when he was 27 years old, and it would be his breakthrough as an artist. It's grand, dramatic, spectacular, words that apply to many of Martin's works. In complete contrast to his humble beginnings as a young kid, when he lived with his parents and siblings in a single-room house, Martin had slowly worked himself up from a drawing teacher to an artist who was not afraid to develop his own unique style. The composition was very unconventional, a wild landscape with hundreds of small figures who provide the historical setting, the large buildings of the Israelite city of Gibeon, and the dramatic weather which divides the painting in two halves. When the city of Gibeon was attacked by the Ammonites, the Israelite leader Joshua asked the help of God to halt the sun's movement to have more time to fight, and to send a devastating hailstorm on the enemy, which we can see on the left side. So, now that John Martin had found the formula to success as an artist, it was a matter of finding other epic historical stories, like the Fall of Babylon, which he painted 2 years later. For the rest of his life, he worked his way through the biblical disasters and those that were predicted to come in the future. John Martin would become one of the leading Romanticist artists in England, combining his vast landscapes with tiny figures, impressive architecture, and dramatic weather. Time and time again, he would try to find a balance between painting a dramatic landscape and the historical narrative. Take, for example, the seventh plague of Egypt. It's not really a typical architectural painting, but it's also not a typical landscape painting, for which his contemporaries like John Constable and J.M.W. Turner became famous. This work by Turner is entitled Fishermen at Sea, and the emphasis is on the seascape instead of on the narrative. Similarly, this painting by Constable, entitled Salisbury Cathedral from the Bishop's Garden, doesn't have a real narrative. It's a combination of a landscape with a great architectural building. Well, the impressive architecture is also visible in many of Martin's paintings. Returning to the seventh plague of Egypt, one viewer may be looking more at the impressive buildings of the city of Thebes or the pyramids in the background. Someone else may be looking first at the dramatic thunder and hailstorm which dominates the composition. But at the same time, when we zoom in, there is a clear narrative. Moses and Aaron initiating the plague by pointing the staff to heaven, and the Egyptians are on the other side trying to make sense of what has just happened. Summarizing, Martin finds a unique balance between the human narrative, the dramatic weather, and the architectural splendor. When people started to like his large paintings, John Martin got several opportunities to convert his rising fame into some money. The most direct way was to sell a painting that he exhibited at the Royal Academy or receive a paid commission for a new work. But Martin also saw another opportunity: the large size of his paintings and the amount of drama that each one contained made them perfect for exhibitions. Look, for example, at Belshazzar's Feast. When the Babylonian king Belshazzar held a great feast, a mysterious writing appeared on the palace wall. The king invited Daniel to interpret these words, and we can see him at the center dressed in black, while the king is retreating on the right. There are so many spectacular details in this painting that the painting made a tour of England, where thousands of people paid an entrance fee to see the painting. and John Martin had made a pamphlet explaining to viewers how to interpret the painting and identify the figures and structures like the Tower of Babel and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon in the background. The fact that people were willing to pay to see his works around the country increased the value of his paintings a lot. Now art dealers would buy his paintings at a premium, as they could first recoup the money from touring the painting through the country, and then they would still be able to sell the work in the end. Another way in which John Martin exploited his success was that he started to produce Mezzotints, an elaborate engraving technique that could be used for beautiful black and white reproductions of his artworks and book illustrations. So instead of creating a single instance of an artwork, it allowed him to sell copies of his works to a much larger audience. You can see here the original and the mezzotint of Joshua commanding the sun to stand still upon Gibeon next to each other. The overall composition is the same, but you can actually discover quite some differences in the details of both works. Martin not only created mezzotints of his own paintings, but created special illustrations for John Milton's book Paradise Lost, of which you can see a few examples here. And while Martin was a very successful painter, he probably made even more money through his mezzotints than his paintings. Almost all of John Martin's works are pretty impressive, and I can totally recommend checking out one of his works in real life if you have the opportunity. Looking back in art history, two artists who influenced Martin stand out: the 17th century French artist Claude Lorrain and Nicolas Poussin. You can see some of their works here. Both artists combined landscapes with a narrative, and John Martin added the drama to it. It may not be surprising that his works also inspired many future artists, perhaps most noticeably the British-American artist Thomas Cole, who would be the founder of the Hudson River School, an important movement of landscape painters capturing the natural beauty of the United States and the rest of the world on large canvases. Cole would actually start his career more in the style of John Martin, and only later in his career did he focus on pure landscape scenes, although he hung on to the sense of drama in Martin's paintings. Finally, as I allude to more often, artistic tastes can strongly differ over time. What we appreciate today may be obscure in a few decades, and vice versa. But for few artists the fluctuations have been so extreme as for John Martin. During his life he was very successful. After his death, his art was quickly forgotten as new art movements were developed. There are records from the 1930s when his works were sold for a few dollars. But after that he researched, and nowadays tens of thousands are paid for some of his mezzotints. And this painting entitled Pandemonium was sold earlier this century for more than $2 million and is now on display in the Louvre Museum. Well, I hope you enjoyed this discussion of the art of John Martin, a truly spectacular artist. I would love to hear from you if you have any favorites among his works, and if you want to support the channel, please hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be alerted when new videos are released. Thanks for watching.